JDL USA presents Rabbi Nachum Shifren, public speaker, author, and good friend of the late Rabbi Meir Kahana.
Well, we are once again united, and this is this week's Parsha, VAYEITZEI. Very interesting things happen here. Of course, every Parsha is interesting, right? You know, there was a very interesting video that came out a while ago, and it shows this girl in a job interview, and she's being interviewed by the CEO of the company. And in the middle of the interview, she takes out her iPhone and starts texting. And the CEO is incredulous. He's looking at the girl as if a scientist looking under a microscope and some sort of a microbe. And he's saying, "Young lady, are you aware that this is a job interview?" And she said, completely, unruffled, "Well, I just got a text." Now, for some of us, that's almost as bizarre as anything that could ever be. However, the problem is there's only some of us that think like that. Talk about doing the right thing at the right time, knowing the difference between when the right time is right and not. I recall a conversation I had with a German gentleman who, this is in my days when I was actually living in Europe, traveling, studying. And we talked about World War II. I speak German, by the way. That's another topic. And I talked to him. He was fighting on the Eastern Front, which of course means bad news if you're a German. You don't want to be there. And he said something interesting. He's from Hamburg. And he said, we left our homes, or I should say his parents left their home because of the bombing that the Allies did, called the, the blanket bombing, or what was it called? Carpet bombing of Europe. They took down all the major cities of Germany, as some of you may recall. But their home, their apartment complex was spared. A year later, after when the war ended, and they were able to return home to the home that was still standing, they entered in the door. They saw the china, the silverware, plates. Everything was ready for dinner. Nothing had been touched. No looting, no nothing. And why am I saying that? There's some things, maybe you might want to call them universal truths, universal attitudes, whatever, that are just they're unwritten, but they're in stone nonetheless, about behavior. This week's Parsha talks a little bit about that. Interesting that the Shla about Jacob, he ran away from Esau, of course, who was going to kill him. And now years later, he's coming back into the land to reclaim the land that God promised him and his progeny. So on the way to see his future wife, Rachel, he comes upon a well. And he sees a whole bunch of shepherds just kind of like chilling out. It's like probably about, 3:00 in the afternoon, from what we can tell in the Parsha. And they're just kind of lingering around, not doing much. And he says to them, what are you guys doing? And the shepherds say, well, we're waiting here. And he says, if you're an employee, a HaYom, then the day's not over yet. And if you're not a HaYom, and you're not a daily paid employee, then you're doing the wrong thing. What are you doing? You should be working until the day is over. Now, if someone were to come up to you today with that attitude, the first thing you'd probably say is, "Who are you?" Before you give him the middle finger, you might say a few words to him. This is something that is very, very, Rashi mentions it. Rashi's our Torah commentator. He mentions it very briefly, very cursorily. And he gives us just what we said. He said, if you're a daily laborer, then you're not done yet. And if you're not a daily laborer, then you're doing the wrong thing. You're supposed to be herding your flocks until it is time to quit. Now, this is very strange. Jacob's coming. He's on the way to pursue his destiny, to be the leader of the Jewish people at that point, to spawn the 12 tribes of Israel before they go into Egypt. It's a very strange thing. The Shla mentions that an employee who does not do his job, it's like he's ripping off his employer. He's doing a great harm, great sin, basically. You're stealing from your employer. And yet, it just seems very strange that the Torah tells us this anecdote, seemingly completely unrelated. It is unrelated to the big picture of going to find his future wives, Leah and Rachel, in Haran. So what do we get out of this? This week's Parsha is about, well, how should we put the subscript here? What should it say? Doing the right thing? Could be. Every one of us has a job. Every one of us works. We've worked at companies. We've worked at whatever. And we see the sloth and the millions and millions of dollars of waste that goes by daily. Baba Metzia, one of the Gemaras, says, they ask a question, Ad matai shomer sachir chayav, what's the word here? That's right. Lavod. Until what time should a daily paid employee worker, until what time should he be working, right? And then they gave this amazing answer, and they base it on the text from the Torah that we're going to read that Jacob said before he left Haran and his evil brother-in-law, Lavan. He says, Ad Kadeh, let's see, what does it say here? Ad Kadeh Haiti Bayom, what does it say? Oh God. Bayom Achlani Chorev Bekerach Balayla. In other words, he claims that he was working for years, for 14 years. He worked for his brother-in-law in order to get Rachel, his wife. He worked till during the day, the sun would burn him, and at night it would be as cold as ice. And he never lost one sheep out of the whole thing, out of all the years he worked. I don't know if any of us could imitate or stand in the shoes of Jacob at this point, but it just shows you this amazing dedication to doing the right thing. And this gives us, and what is the salient point that we get from here? Jacob, as was Isaac, as was Abraham, they were called the chariot, the Merkava. Chariot only moves according to the rider, the driver. If the driver pulls the reins to the left, the chariot goes to the left. There's no decision on the part of the chariot. And that's who Jacob was. And he emulates for us what is real, what is just, what is righteous, and all those things. So something to think about when we're on our way to work. Now, another thing, interesting, Jacob became very wealthy, as many of you know, through the sheep and through the selling the sheep and the camels and maidservants, and he didn't lack a thing. But God promised him that he would keep him alive, would save him through all the trials and tribulations. And it's interesting, he focuses on this one thing. He says, God, if you'll just give me enough bread to eat and clothing to wear, I will be able to perform your will. I'll do everything that you've asked me to do. Notice there was no talk of a Tesla or a BMW or whatever. The basic things in life, bread, by the way, not the bread that you see in the supermarkets today. That wouldn't even pass for bread. Our forefathers wouldn't know what that stuff is. I've tasted real bread in my life. Have you? Think about it. Bread to eat and clothing to wear. That's all he asked for. In other words, keep it real, keep it simple, keep it down to the things that we really need. And a lot of us, this gives us a pause to think about what is it that we're pursuing. It's kind of like a reality check of our daily ventures into the workforce, into our families, to relating to other people, what we want to achieve for ourselves, for our lives, what will be our legacy. And sometimes it's good to think about keeping it real, keeping it simple, and only the things that we really need to survive. Actually, all we really need is just a few things. And as we notice that I would say 25% of our youth at this point is diabetic, something that's absolutely scandalous. You look around, see the overweight people, the amazing amount of degenerative diseases in our society, everywhere. Israel, here, wherever we go. That's today's Torah message. Seems a little bit unceremonious, doesn't it? Talking about just bread, clothing, workers, what should be the role of a worker. But nonetheless, whatever the Torah tells us is eternal. And there's a message there for all of us to learn. And on that note, let's wish you a wonderful Shabbat. May we increase in Torah learning with our children, with our grandchildren, sitting around, learning together, being able to do that which God has graced us with, the wonderful gifts that we have. God bless everybody. Shabbat Shalom.